Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Last Punisher, a SEAL Team 3 sniper's true account of the Battle of Ramadi. By Kevin Lace, with Ethan E. Rocke and Lindsay Lace. Narrated by Timothy Phillips. Forward. I first came to know of Kevin Dauber Lace when I was working on writing American Sniper in 2009 with Chris Kyle. Chris let me know that Kevin was someone who knew the details of what Chris had done in Iraq and could be trusted. More importantly, Chris told me that he was a close friend. In turn, Kevin became one of the very few men who were interviewed while writing Chris's book. Many, like myself, knew some of Chris's story. Few, like Kevin, knew virtually all of it. A few years later, American Sniper was brought to the screen, and Kevin lent his expertise to the filmmakers. Not only was Kevin the only SEAL on the set advising the film's star Bradley Cooper and director Clint Eastwood, he was the only person on the set who had known Chris in any capacity. Without Kevin Lace, American Sniper could never have been as authentic or successful as it ultimately became. Through war, fame, fortune, and death, Kevin has remained true to his friend and brother, Chris Kyle. My initial approach to The Last Punisher was that I might read it and learn some new information about Chris. After all, Kevin served 2 combat deployments with him and certainly has his share of stories about the man we call the legend. As I read it, however, I became engrossed in how complex this book is, and how much more to it there is than a collection of war stories, some of which feature Chris Kyle. But this is not simply a book about Chris. This is an important memoir by a man with a capacity for violence. Devoid of politics and with unsparing honesty, The Last Punisher delves deeply into the psyche of an operator with an unrelenting desire to eliminate his country's enemies. From the very first chapter, when we learn of Kevin's motivation behind joining the military, to the last, we witness the maturity of a SEAL who cut his teeth in one of the Iraq War's bloodiest summers. It is raw, unforgivingly honest, and unique to contemporary war literature. It is historically important, not only for its subject matter, but also for taking a new approach to delivering a military memoir in an engaging and unforgettable way. Knowing Kevin in the capacity that I do now, and knowing he devotes a substantial amount of his time helping others in his chosen medical profession, I believe this book illustrates a particularly important lesson. One can participate fully in combat and still participate fully in society. Kevin gives a new voice to a substantial group of veterans being largely ignored, those who have served, who survived, and who now thrive. His experiences overseas, while gruesome and shocking to some, have not impeded him from reintegrating seamlessly into the civilian world and experiencing success. I applaud him for bringing attention to these men and women who have served with honor, even witnessing and committing acts of violence in combat and come home to do great things. This book is about the amazing true grit of SEAL Team 3, Charlie Platoon, in some of the worst days of battle in the history of the U.S. SEAL teams and the United States. I was obviously already well-versed in Chris Kyle's story and knew a little of Kevin's. As I read more, I saw that each of these men is incredibly special, and that each has his own unique story of sacrifice and courage. I appreciated Kevin's willingness to share the pages with his brothers and tell their stories as well, because these men are truly the best of what America has to offer. This is not one man's tribute to himself. It is one man's tribute to his team. The epitome of the SEAL attitude of never quit runs through Kevin's veins and throughout this book. Many people change their view of the world once they are thrust into the limelight of Hollywood and acting, but Kevin did not. He remained true to his friends, his family, the teams, and the code by which he lives his life. For that, I respect him greatly, and am proud to call him my friend. Scott McEwen, #1 New York Times best-selling co-author of American Sniper and the nationally best-selling Sniper Elite series of novels. May 9th, 2016. Preface. This memoir contains my true account of the Battle of Ramadi as I experienced it as a new guy with Task Unit Bruiser Charlie Platoon, SEAL Team 3. In 2006, Western Iraq was embroiled in sectarian violence. Morale was low, and a deadly insurgency threatened the coalition mission. As a result, SEAL Team 3 was deployed to fight in the pivotal Battle of Ramadi in an effort to aid in securing Anbar province's capital city. While much has been discussed and written about our work over that summer, Ramadi was not won by SEALs and special operators alone. There was no single commander who brought the enemy to its knees. Rather, it was the combined effort of the Army, Marines, Navy, and Air Force that turned the tide of the battle against the insurgency. This story is reflective of that cooperation. Now the work we conducted in Ramadi during the spring, summer, and fall of 2006 is merely a piece of history. The peace we secured, block by block, alley by alley, and room by room, does not exist today. Those of us who fought there, who bled there, and who lost brothers there, can only hope that the many lessons learned in Ramadi may one day serve as guidelines for how conventional units and special operations can work together and win on future battlefields. To that end, I offer this piece of history as a sort of primary source for those who would look into the recent past and wonder what combat looked like at the height of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Peace in Ramadi no longer exists. Our story, however, does. My decision to join the SEAL teams was swift and final. The road to earning my trident was long and arduous. During my preparation, I consumed as many first-hand accounts of BUDS, the SEAL teams, and combat operations as I could. It was my hope when I took on this endeavor that my story might help inspire the next generation of warriors. I know that somewhere there are special young men reading everything they can about special forces, and some of them will wear the trident with pride and continue to serve the teams, the brotherhood, and our country. In a small way, this story is for them. One of the basic principles of the SEAL teams is, earn your trident every day. As SEALs, we strive to continually earn our reputation as dependable operators who get the job done. We pride ourselves on our violence of action and our ability to neutralize an aggressive enemy. We are not robotic, nor are we lemmings. Each operator is an individual fighting machine, capable of leading at any level, striving for nothing less than mission success. We are relentless. I tried to convey the dynamic nature of the men I knew in this book. Together, we formed one lethal task unit, and still as individuals they were brothers, husbands, fathers, and sons. I have an enormous amount of respect for human life. At a very young age, I decided to pursue a career in medicine, and today I serve as a physician assistant. When I joined the Navy in response to terrorism, I knew that eventually I would meet the enemy on the battlefield. As a SEAL, it was my job to engage the enemy and deliver the proper amount of force to disable them. Most people will never understand the simplicity of that concept and violence of action. Most people are not SEALs. I believe that SEALs are born, not made, and that I was fortunate enough to be born with the ability to go downrange and do the job. Many of my fellow warriors who have carried the battle flag understand. For these reasons, no matter how long I live, I will never match the vitality I shared within the brotherhood, among family. During my career in the teams, I witnessed feats of heroism and bravery from my teammates, many of whom are no longer living. This is a written contribution to their legacy, as it is to the entire SEAL teams. My only hope is that it meets the expectations of the brothers who helped make me the team guy I am, and whom I admire and respect. The decision to write this book was a weighty one, and several other SEALs have asked why I chose to. Some would not. I respect other operators' codes of silence. However, I believe I have a different perspective than a career SEAL with 20 years in the teams. My 8 years in the Navy were relatively brief compared to many others. I joined in response to 9/11, gave my time and expertise, and then moved on. This is one thing I have done in my life, not the only thing. Many guys I was in the teams with joined the teams before the war. I joined the teams for the war. This is my story. During my time in Ramadi, I kept a journal of my experiences. I hoped primarily to keep a record so I would have something tangible to reflect upon when my memory began to fade in old age. I never anticipated its value when I wrote in it, over poor lighting, as a young frogman in 2006. It proved to be tremendously useful in writing this memoir. In regard to spoken dialogue, I made my best attempt to capture the spirit of words that passed between men when my memory failed. Unfortunately, nearly 10 years later, it's simply not possible for me to remember many of the words that were spoken between us. The actual events that are described, in particular the events described on target, are written as I remember them, and according to the recollection of others who were there and whom I consulted with while writing. It is important to mention that no classified information was used in the preparation of this memoir. I enlisted some of my closest friends at various stages for clarification and detail. I thank them for their assistance. The manuscript was submitted to and approved by the Pentagon Security Review process in accordance with the Department of Defense and Naval Special Warfare. In addition, the members of the platoon, as well as other Navy personnel who appear in the memoir, were contacted during its preparation. An overwhelming majority were supportive and willing to be represented. They are described by either first name or nickname. I thank them for their unwavering support. Occasionally, I assigned aliases to protect the identity of certain service members. My time in the teams shaped who I am today. I would not change either my positive or my negative experiences. In life, I believe you never move on from a life-changing experience, but you can move forward. The SEAL teams helped me discover my own potential, especially when I least expected it. When I completed my enlistment, I took my lessons learned and deployed them toward my Bachelor of Arts at the University of Connecticut in political science, and then earned a Master's of Medical Science at Wake Forest University, where I graduated as a physician assistant. I am currently a partner at Lifestyle and Performance Medicine, powered by Regenesis, where I help people achieve their potential in a medical setting. My military experience has allowed me to give back to the people I served with. Inspired by my wife, Lindsay, we launched Hunting for Healing to work with service-disabled veterans and their spouses through outdoor hunting and fishing excursions. I believe that stronger individuals make stronger teams. I am not a self-made man. I am merely a product of the company I have been fortunate enough to keep. I do not dwell in Ramadi, the teams, or my past experiences. I do, however, utilize them to help shape each environment I engage in. For them, I am forever grateful. Prologue. Get your shit! All hands to the roof of Shark House! Marc Lee's breathless bark snapped me out of sleep. I didn't think as I jolted off my cot, stuck my bare feet in my Oakley boots, and grabbed my web gear, machine gun, helmet, and night vision goggles, NVGs. I ran hot on Mark's heels in nothing but a pair of PT shorts and some assault gear as we raced the 100 yards to the roof like sharks towards blood in the water. Impending violence permeated the Euphrates' musty breeze. "Moose swimmers trying to attack Blue Diamond," Mark called over his shoulder as we hit the ground floor entrance to the house. Camp Blue Diamond was the Marine base across the river to our east. We bounded up the stairs, untied bootlaces, whipping our bare shins. On the roof, we joined about 20 other team guys, most of us in PT shorts and bare-chested, the unofficial uniform for middle of the night, just out of Iraq moose hunting. I saw an occasional T-shirt and had to stifle a chuckle when I noticed Guy, one of our officers, and his perfect uniform. A hodgepodge of support guys intermixed among us. When Mark said all hands, he had meant all hands. Everybody wanted to get his war on. The Mouge had sent a sorry contingent of maritime fighters to attack the Marine base. Blue Diamond had alerted our Tactical Operations Center, TOC, who in turn had coordinated the perfect L-shaped ambush. We stood poised, waiting for the green light from our Base Defense Operations Center on Camp Ramadi. Our mismatched uniforms and patchwork appearance belied our deadly potential. We stood silently, vipers waiting to strike. Somebody was going to have a bad night. Guy was on my left. Marc Lee and Ryan Job fell in alongside him. JP was to my right. We were new to war, but our brotherhood spanned many generations and was forged by a proud warrior tradition. We were ready. A few spots to my right, a support guy named Neil was armed to the teeth. I stifled another chuckle. His gear was an arsenal of grenades, M4 mags, and trinkets. He had no NVGs. I turned my attention back across the quiet river. My night vision infiltrated the darkness, and I could see movement. I pushed the safety off on my gun and turned on my infrared laser. Then the command came. 3, 2, 1, execute! Together, we unleashed hell on the river below and the unsuspecting Mooj lurking in its waters. It was euphoric. I methodically delivered 150 rounds in precise 8 to 10 round bursts. The tracers screamed across the water. Some hit and stuck, others deflected and fizzled into the night. The intense energy of American ordnance and thunder of machine guns singing all around left no doubt in my mind. I was born for this. I looked around me at every other man doing exactly the same thing and realized that this is how it had always been. Since the first man threw a rock, to when a man chucked a spear, to when another man aimed his rifle. It has come down to a man, his weapon, and the brothers who will fight with him. At that moment, everyone who mattered to me was on that rooftop. Nothing existed beyond Ramadi. These were the men who would bring me out alive, as I would them. I had literally nothing but my gun and my brothers. I hope it will always be like this. I didn't notice my scalding hot shell casing ejecting toward JP's exposed leg to my right. I didn't care. When the abrupt call to ceasefire finally came, my ears rang, my hands tingled, and the enemy was dead or dying. I felt alive. Someone was yelling at Neil for firing 6 mags at the enemy with no night vision on. We called him Shadow Stalker for the rest of the deployment. A gunner's mate tech asked sheepishly, "Hey man, am I going to get my combat action ribbon for this?" "Sure man," I said, deciding to let him revel in his glory for a little while. I checked my left flank. Guy, Mark, and Ryan had the familiar look of satisfaction that operating a powerful weapon delivers. JP cussed the burns on his left calf from my brass. I shrugged and took a deep breath. The smell of cordite from hundreds of spent rounds mixed with a breeze from the Euphrates' ancient waters. I put my gun on safe and hit the pressure pad for the laser. I grabbed my gear and began the walk back to my tent, wondering how many similar opportunities I'd have like this over the next 7 months. I didn't want it to change me or us, any of us. I didn't think ahead to the future, where I'd be as a man, or a husband, or a father a decade later. It didn't matter at that time. I just needed to clean my gun. I was in Ramadi, and I'd be back in my rack before the flies found the meat we'd left for them in the reeds. Later, I lay awake for a moment before falling into a satisfied sleep, confident in the work I had done with the others. I hope it will always be like this. February 2nd, 2013. The bar had a typical college feel to it. The slight touch of hippie made it the type of place that in my past life I would have tried to avoid. It was early, and the Winston-Salem, North Carolina night was just getting going. I settled into a much-needed night off from studying and routine grad school life, as the opening snap of a cue ball breaking the rack cut into my conversation with my wife, Lindsay. I took a pull from the Coors Light bottle. Some things never change. My phone vibrated in my pocket. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. I was enjoying a rare night out at a friend's birthday party, and I really didn't need a distraction. Then again, I wasn't the average physician assistant student. I had a kid at home with a babysitter, and I had a job outside of school. I checked the phone. The last thing I needed was to miss an important call. The screen read, Steve Young, Kraft CEO. I thought it strange for the boss to call at 8 p.m. on a weekend. I answered, figuring it had to be important. "Hey, Steven," I said, my phone held tight to my right ear and my fingers plugging my left to block out the noise of the bar. "What's up?" I immediately realized something was very wrong from the tone of Steven's voice. The words tumbled out at me, and I collected what I could. "Dauber, something bad happened earlier." Chris is gone. Shot earlier today with Chad. Murder. I'm so sorry. The phone stayed fixed at my ear, but I didn't hear the rest of what he said. I felt like I'd just been punched in the face. I guess you could call it shock. I shot a look across the bar at Lindsay, whose eyes were glued on me. She knew something was wrong. I mumbled a thanks to Stephen and a request to keep me posted, then hung up the phone. I walked over to Lindsay. I didn't want to tell her. Since we'd met nearly 7 years earlier, we'd grown accustomed to breaking this kind of news to each other. More often, it was me who broke it to her. Sometimes over the phone when I learned of the death of someone I'd served with, sometimes even via text, other times face-to-face, like this. I didn't want to tell her. She was happy, standing there, enjoying a night out. Reluctantly, I grabbed her hand and led her out of the bar. I looked at her face in the streetlight. I thought of the news I'd broken to her over the years and how she'd taken it on with me, because they were my losses. Each time, she had mourned with me, respectfully paying tribute to the men I called brothers. This was going to be different. The longer I'd been out of the teams, the more my core group of friends had dwindled. Chris had remained constant. I knew this was going to hurt. When we were still dating and living in Imperial Beach, California, I took her along on a sniper shoot east of San Diego. All the snipers in the task unit came, and a couple of us brought our girlfriends. Chris was solo that day, so we spent the afternoon sighting in the guns and teaching the chicks to shoot. Lindsay had never shot a rifle before, but I could tell she was happy, especially after I watched her hit a headplate target at 500 meters. Chris was the first to praise her with a "hell yeah." With praise coming from the legend, she was especially proud of her shooting. I thought about the fun we'd all had together over the years. This time, it was her loss too. As I told her, I watched her crumble. A mixture of disbelief and confusion contorted her face for a few moments before the tears came. She hugged me briefly and silently, obviously in the same state of shock that I was in. As we walked the short block to the car, she stopped suddenly, hunched over, and vomited in an alley. Without a word, she straightened back up and got in the car to go home. I felt nothing but unsettled behind the wheel. I had just spoken to Chris the day before about a work project. He texted me hours before his murder. We planned to talk the next day. The abruptness left me at a loss for words. There is an inherent danger to being a team guy. Before I took my oath to join the Navy, I realized that I might get hurt doing the job. I understood that I or someone I knew might get killed along the way. There's nothing morbid about it. It's just business. I guess that realization helped condition or prepare me for the bad news, which had come steadily. I was on a beach in Jacksonville, Florida, when I heard the news of Extortion 17, a helicopter mission in Afghanistan in 2011, and the fate of John Tummelson and Derek D. Rocke Benson, guys whom I had worked with at Team 3. I was shocked, but quietly at ease with the fact they died doing a job they wanted. They were fighting alongside brothers. Chris was different. I called Guy, our old LT, as I drove through the silent streets of Winston-Salem. Voicemail. "LT, this is Dauber. Give me a call when you get this." The texts from the other team guys began to pour in, but I really didn't want to read them. "You hear about Chris? WTF?" When I got back to the house, I grabbed the bottle of bourbon and stared at the computer screen. Murder. I let the burn of the liquor resonate as I felt the sting of the word on my soul. I couldn't shake the dirtiness of it. Murdered. Chris and Chad. I poured myself another glass and closed my eyes. I had just visited Dallas a few months earlier for a work trip and sat across from Chris in his Midlothian living room. My belly ached from the jokes we told and the incessant wisecracks that were traded. He was bandaged from his knees down due to an unfortunate sunburn sustained on the Gulf of Mexico. For all the years in the teams that I spent with Chris, I rarely saw him in shorts. His most recent fishing trip on a flat-bottom boat left him burned and his ego bruised. We sat, joked, drank, and chewed as the Rangers game hummed in the background. We had been to Iraq together, the place where tough guys go and come out even tougher. We transitioned out of the teams to the other side comfortably and now worked at his company. For all the experiences shared, we didn't talk about war. I saw the same smile he left us with in Iraq in 2006 when he headed home to be with his kids. We swapped stories about our kids. He couldn't wait for football season to start. I promised to call him when the Patriots won and the Cowboys lost. He told me that I wouldn't have many calls to make. All that would change now. I opened my eyes as Lindsay cracked open the office door. I had no idea how long I'd been thinking. I looked up at her and then glanced at my phone. She could tell I didn't want to talk. Lindsay is my rock, but there are some things I just deal with on my own. She knows that. She closed the door as my phone rang again. I passed along all the information I had to Guy. He was incredulous. Guy served as our officer in 2008, and the three of us had kept in close contact in the years after leaving the teams. The silence on the phone lingered like a long-range desert patrol in Iraq. "Fuck, I'm sorry, Dobbs. Let me know what else you hear. I'm there for you." I relayed the same and poured another drink. I sat alone in the room and reminisced about the good times. My transition out of the military changed my affiliation with the teams. Once I was out, I became a former action guy, a guy who used to do cool things but has moved on. It's not the most glorious self-realization, but it is reality. My departure from the teams changed my direction. I was on the path to becoming a physician assistant. I had earned a bachelor's in political science. I had a wife and a son and a house and a whole life that separated me from who I was when I was a team guy. Yet somehow, I've always felt drawn back to the teams. Especially in times like those, at the death of a brother. I realized that a team guy is never really out. The brotherhood binds us for longer than a deployment, longer than a platoon, longer than a workup. I recalled the phone call Chris made to me to tell me that Ryan Biggles Job had passed in 2009. It was my first introduction to loss outside the teams, and it was raw. I could make sense of dying on the battlefield, but Ryan had overcome his injuries and lived a full life several years before succumbing to complications from a reconstructive surgery. When Chris called and told me, I felt angry, like we'd been cheated. There was no goodbye. Just a few days before his death, Ryan had called to tell me his wife was pregnant. He was so happy. Then he was gone. I regretted that I hadn't told him more. I hadn't told him how proud I was of him. I didn't say how much of an inspiration he was to others and the team guys around him. There was no going back, only memories to relive. Ryan was the beginning of a cycle. There would be more phone calls and bad news, more anger and memories, and more of the feeling that I am always connected to the brotherhood, no matter how long it's been since I've worn the uniform. Pat Feeks, Nick Check, Matt Leathers, Tim Martin. The list goes on. Each time the loss brings me back. And now Chris had left us just as suddenly as Biggles and the others, with nothing but memories to relive. Each time the news incites the same rage. The rage is not directed toward any individual, but rage that the world lost a favorite son. The memories I had of these individuals strengthen this claim. These were giants among men, and they will no longer walk among us. I feel sorrow for the future that will not know them. I felt the rage boil in me when I thought about Chris. I downed the last of my bourbon. There was only one place to go when you lose a close friend, a teammate, a brother. You have to go back. My time in the teams constantly intersects with the present. It is unavoidable. Each time I suffer a loss, I go back to better times when I knew him living. I go back to the genesis, the beginning of my Frogman days. There is a comfort in this journey. It takes me back to the brotherhood, to the blood, the sweat, and the tears endured to earn the beloved burden. It helps me not to lament the passing of a teammate, but rather to relish in the luxury I was afforded to live and fight next to him. Many people search their entire lives for meaning or for a single memorable experience. My time in the teams with the Punishers, with Chris, was my holy grail. I slid my glass to the side and opened a file on the computer.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?